Here I want to take a look at the deform rigs available in Rigit, which you get by using the nulls deform style of rigging here, and explain some of how this stuff works. Right, first of all, of course, I'm sure you'll probably be familiar already, but a nulls deform rig, let me just add, I don't know, just a pair of legs in here for say's sake, will construct your rig out of nulls. The actual controllers are all nulls, but you have these bones that string over the top, which will be what actually deforms your character. Okay, so that's all handy and great. First thing that you can notice, by default the deform rig will generate as joints here, as it's usually the preferred option. However, depending on exactly what you're going to do with the deform rig, you can alter that. Deform rig gives you a couple of different options that are really good to have. First of all, if you're just animating and you're going to render and all of that stuff in Lightwave, then using this rig style will give you better quality deformation, or at least it gives you access to have better quality deformations going on in your character. What it also provides is a very simple, clean hierarchy. So you see that compared to all of these large numbers of control items that we've got going on in the main rig itself, the actual bones that will deform our character are very few indeed, and they go direct bone to bone. There's no ugly in-betweens that are used to handle gimbal or IK planes or anything else. This means that if you're wanting to set a character up and animate it to go out to a game engine like Unity or some such, then you would want to use this style of rig, as you would animate your rig and at the end you would bake the animation down onto these bones, lose all of the nulls, and you'll just be left with a pure bones animation skeleton that you can then easily export out. In the case of such export, it's usually best not to use joints at all, but to use Z-bones, and you can do that very easily by just selecting, at any point during the rigging process I should point out, the deform rig bones that you already have selected, that you already have created rather, and just switch them to Z axis. It goes a little bonkers to start with, but let's just do a little rig fit there, and there we go. We see that the bones have lengthen themselves appropriately. So basically, you can use whichever you prefer, bones, Z-axis bones that is, or joints in the deform rig. They're still all hooked up exactly the same way and function no differently. So there you go. When you generate a part like the legs here or arms or whatever else, what you will get is you will always get the most simple bone hierarchy for the deform rig, and you can customize this further by using the Deforms tab. So let's take a little peek at what we can do there. So to demonstrate this, I've thrown in just a simple bit of arm geometry there, and we'll go ahead and we'll throw an arm onto this. I'm just going to add a single arm in this instance. I'll pop a girdle on it, and we'll just parent it to the main root there. Pop the arm into its appropriate position like this. Okay, so there we are. We've got just a simple arm set up there in our arm, and we can see straight away the kind of deforms that this gives us as is standard. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Well, there you go, basically. So let's look at how we customize the deform rig, because it is, of course, as I said, exceedingly simple. First of all, let's understand some of the things that can go on, or problems that you can get. First of all, let's look at the upper arm here. When you rotate the upper arm from the shoulder, it doesn't, rotate right on the shoulder point, which is, of course, what we're seeing here. The rotation is happening right from the very top there. That's usually undesired. Now, of course, here I'm using joints, so if I go select this joint bone part and bring up its properties, I can turn on, for instance, the twist parameter here, and I'll set that at 100%. So hopefully that will, give us distributed twist. Of course it doesn't, because it's not looking at the twist of this upper part, it looks at the twist of the next part, and you don't want to go twisting your elbow on that axis. Something else has also happened here though, which is when my elbow comes beyond 90 degrees, my arm does this horrible geometry flip, which is because of the twist modifier. If I turn that off, you'll notice that there isn't actually a problem with it. So of course the twist modifier would be doing nothing for us here. It would be good on the lower arm here. If I put it on the forearm and I set that to 100%, then that's grand, because of course when posing the hand you would twist that like this and you get the nice distributed twist effect there going on the forearm. But we're a bit out of luck on the upper arm here. Though what you can do, of course, is having that bone selected, have things like joint compensation going on, or of course you can have on the forearm bone here joint comp for parent, muscle flexing for parent and stuff like that to get those effects coming in straight away, just like this, as we see there. Let me come down to a slightly better angle so you can see that going on there. Okay, so let's set those guys back to what's, oh, it doesn't matter, I can just go straight into fit mode and that'll reset me. Okay, so what does Deform Rig adjustments allow us to do about this? Well, let's go over to Deforms here. When working on Deform Rig, you don't select the controllers, you want to select the actual bones or joints themselves. And do be careful if you are using a joints-based deform rig, because remember that the deformer pivot is back to front. So here I've selected the elbow joint, and if I select this upper arm bone, no, it's still the elbow. This deformer bone piece actually belongs to the pivot point here. So generally, to make sure you're selecting the right part, try and select the joint parts rather than the bone parts, or if you are going to select the bone parts, remember that you need to select the one above the joint to get that correct joint. Any which how, let's straight away look at this. So I want to first of all deal with this, twisting of the arm here. Okay, so I can select any joint in the arm, it doesn't matter which, and I click unroll top. Okay, this creates an unroll system for me, and what we notice is that when I twist this fellow, the top is no longer rolling. You'll notice it's going round on the pitch and the heading as you would expect it to, but you see that that joint is not following on the bank there, you see, so our rotation is only coming in at the elbow point. This is the point where I could come in here now and turn on twist, and because I have unrolled the top, I now get a distributed twist going down the upper arm there. However, we do still have that same problem that we saw before, because I've used the twist modifier and that is terminating from the elbow joint. When I come in past 90 degrees, I still get this ugly flip that happens there. You can't really get away with doing a distributed twist down a joint too easily. Even with the unrolled top, you will still get the bad behaviour coming from this second joint or this next joint in the chain. As such, you have options to deal with that. The easiest way to deal with it is to simply put in an extra joint. So here I can, with, let's say, my shoulder divided, I want to select the actual shoulder joint itself, I'll click divide, and there we go, we'll pop back into rig mode, Bones Viz. You can see that I've added a dividing joint here, has been applied, and what I can now do is, you'll notice that I've still got that twist behaviour going on there. What's actually happened as well is my twist is starting to distribute into these joints. If I just come back to fit mode for a moment and now select that joint, and I'm going to move it further down towards the elbow, okay, like this, and I'll rig again. I make sure that the twist modifier is not on this little joint there, or on this little bone there, but on this deformer portion there. We set that to 100%, because it is this joint there that is now getting the bank rotation of the arm. The top is still untwisted, and you see that we're getting our nice distributed twist but thanks to this little division joint that I've put in there, what we no longer get now is the elbow flip behaviour. I can come past the 90-degree mark, and that's just smashing. Of course, let me just come back into fit mode, and I'll push this guy back to the midpoint somewhere. It doesn't really matter. If I were using Z bones, I would not have the twist modifier option. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, with that selected, divide again, and you'll notice that I've now got two joints in there. Let me just select all of these bone portions, and I'm going to make sure that twist is absolutely off for all of them. Okay, come back into rig, and what we have is that these joints are now distributing the actual twist on coordinates between themselves. So this first one has rotated a little bit, that one has rotated the rest. If I were using Z bones, this would enable me to get a distributed twist even though I don't have the twist modifier. And you can add as many of these divisions as you like. Quite frankly, it's perfectly fine. So now I've got 3 divisions in there, and I can divide again. And so you see, I just get ever more distributed twist between these different joints. So that's all lovely. So jump back to just the basic 3 joint setup there, again still with the unroll top on, and we see the other functions that we've got here, which is spacers. One of the things that you had in Rigit 1 were these spacer joints at problematic areas like shoulders and various other spots on the different deform rig options that let you space out deformation across a joint. So you can do that here. You select, for instance, the shoulder joint there and hit add spacer, and that will jump in a spacer item for us. And of course you can position that there with the markers to get it, wrapping the amount of space in the, item that you're wanting it to have there. And you rig that, we can see the bones there, and as you see, that gives you spacing across the joint, which helps get much more natural deformation going on in your areas like shoulders, especially when you come inwards this way, or of course backwards like that. So if you want a spaced out shoulder for the character, you can add it on there. Notice of course that this is tied in with the whole unroll system there, so of course that is still properly unrolled. What you will notice that you get with this is still the same behaviour if you try and use twist on this upper arm bone here. Of course the elbow comes to 90 degrees and you get the flip out like that. Again, you would fix this by putting an intermediate somewhere here. You could of course use the division that we just saw, or something that can be helpful in a lot of characters is you might put a spacer onto the elbow, because that will put another little pre-joint ahead of the elbow. So if we add spacer there, and we'll just rig that as it comes, then of course we've got a spacer joint at the elbow, so that helps us to smooth our deformation there, and of course it also sorts out that flipping issue for us. This could also be more handy than using a division on, for instance, the upper arm like this, because one of the things that happens of course when you divide this upper arm bone is that if you're trying to use the muscle flexing or joint compensation, etc. options from the elbow, that only works up to the parent. So you'd have the muscle flex in this lower part of the forearm, of the upper arm, sorry, but nothing in the upper part. If you've used the spacer option at the elbow instead, then you can take the actual spacer joint itself and start putting on stuff like the parental muscle flexing there. And so that allows you to counteract the elbow flip to have the full anti-roll effect of the upper arm here. Well, at least it will do if I turn the twist back on for that joint there. And muscle bulge and everything else all working together quite nicely. Yeah, so there you go. And of course you can add these spacers at some joints and not at others. I mean, if I select the good old clavicle joint there, which would be the head of the shoulder girdle, and I try and add spacer, it'll tell me basically that you can't. But you can also add one at the wrist, because of course what you also have, we've got twist there on the wrist. If we go into rig mode for it, then we can see that, you know, the wrist is also of course going to have some problems with twist. Again, it's at the 90-degree point, but it is on this axis, you know, so I have to come right the way round to the side there for the forearm to do a flip. Now, in a way, that's, you know, not so bad, because of course it's pretty hard to turn your hand 90 degrees to the side that away. But of course, when the wrist is untwisted like this, as your palm forward, you've then again been constrained to 90 degrees one way or the other. Again, it's not easy to get your wrist a full 90 degrees in either extension or flexion like this. So for humanoid characters, this is within an acceptable range of motion, which is why I've done it so as it always happens on this specific axis. It has to happen one way or the other. There's no way that you can have a single point like this with distributed twist and not have a problem. It can't be done in any way. What I've done is I've done it in the least worst way by default. But what you can, again, of course, do is you could divide this forearm, or you could add a spacer joint here at the wrist. And once again, that gives you a little spacer there, which gives you a much increased, you see I've even got the good old muscle flexing going on the forearm there as well. And of course I have got, let me turn it around here, a much increased range of motion without any flipping. And I can now come up to this bone part there and give him a full distributed twist modifier, and it will all work just like that, without snaps or breaks or flips when you get into extremes of pose. And of course, if you wanted, you could still divide this bone here. Oh no, I can't divide that one, that's the wrong one, because I need to select the elbow. That was the wrist. You can't divide the wrist because it didn't make any sense. So I divide the elbow there, and we see that I've got a dividing bone there on the forearm, and of course that all plays together. Set all of those things up if you prefer to do it in that fashion. So there you go. Basically, that is the different deform rig options that you have, and how you can design your deform rig to have all of the splits or spacers exactly as you need them for a given character, how you can choose to use unrolled tops to limbs if you want to be able to do distributed twist going down the limb rather than back up it.